Hey folks, this is Ryan with from Corners Unknown. I hope you're all doing well. I just wrapped up a conversation with Duncan Ritchie of Flowers for Bodysnatchers and the Rosenshoul. We discussed a bit about his recent release on the Cryo Chamber label Asylum Beyond, and in our conversation we discuss a bit about that record as well as his other records on the labels such as Aokigahara and Love Like Blood. We also discuss a bit more about his older project, the Rosenshoul, and some of the video projects he's been involved with over the past number of years. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of the conversation. It was an immense pleasure speaking with Duncan and getting to learn a bit more about his background and his projects. So yeah, thank you very much for your continued support, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. New Zealand?
Yeah, I'm a Kiwi by birth, yeah. Born in Auckland, way back in 1974.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't move to Australia until I was 17, so that was 91. When I moved here, yeah.
Okay. So just to keep it, related to your projects and all that, when you were growing up in the New Zealand area, like what was the musical upbringing for you? Like, were you getting involved in any scenes or like producing music at that time, or?
Actually, I was in the arts. I mean, I studied, art at school, and I later on, when I moved to Australia, did my Bachelor of Fine Arts and my here at the uni here. But as far as being in New Zealand, I followed more of I majored in painting, actually, at school and at uni. But I had always had an interest in music, but I had never really got around to getting into producing it.
I see.
The way that I naturally sort of flowed through life led me to a more visual art than an audio art. It wasn't until I moved to Australia that I changed horses, yeah.
I see. And are you still doing some of the painting? I know you do a decent bit of artwork, at least on your most recent record. You did like the leaflet or the booklet for it and all that.
As far as painting goes, no, because you need another whole studio. I mean, I've already got one studio. I don't have the room for another one.
I see. Okay.
I guess for the sake of convenience, like most people, I took up photography. It was something that I had dabbled with earlier on, and because I traveled around so much, and I lived in Japan for a while in bits and pieces, it's just so much easier to drag a camera around.
I see.
So, yeah.
I see. And when did you go and do that? When did you live in Japan? So that wasn't just a trip or anything. You were living there for a decent bit.
Yeah, I've been 4 times before. We first went 2006 for a holiday. We spent a month there, and we absolutely loved it. We loved it. I was like, damn it, we got to turn around and actually go back. So we went back in 2009 to live, and 1 month turned into 2 months, turned into 3 months, and just kept on going.
Oh wow, that's awesome. Okay. So, like, just to kind of. There may be some of this information out on the web, but I'm curious with respect to painting, and then you went to Australia, and that's when you started falling into the music, or you started doing more of the audio art. You started doing that. Where'd you begin with that kind of stuff? Like, did you just jump straight into like dark ambient style music, or what kind of music?
No, I guess the music scene in Australia is so much more accessible than New Zealand. I mean, New Zealand's got some huge acts like the Crowded House and Split Ends and bits and pieces that come out in New Zealand, but you get to Australia and quite literally, the volume of musicians and accessibility to it had gone through the roof. I mean, I could go and, I got here, I think I'd been here a week, and I'd gone and watched White Zombie play. It was like, shit, I can see the stuff on tap now.
Yeah.
And that was where the inspiration came from. I've had the fortune of seeing Munsters and the New Bolton and everything under the sun that you could possibly imagine, and Nick Cave, you name it, and it just sort of,
wow.
It fed the monster, so to speak. So, and it just slowly sort of came out here, and I've met up with people who are musically talented. I lived with some people who played in bands, and it just sort of kicked in from there.
Okay. And did you besides piano, did you play any sort of instruments, like in guitar or bass or drums or anything like that?
I did have a short stint in school singing for a Guns N' Roses and Metallica cover band, so I've done a little bit of singing. Awesome. Not to say that it was a good idea, but it did lay some groundwork in the earlier stages. But no, piano, synthesizers, a little bit of singing. I do play a little bit of guitar. I guess piano and guitar aren't that different when you look at it.
That's something that I wish I had better perspective on, or like a larger base of knowledge to understand that. But
we always had a piano in the house when I was a kid, so I had sort of halfway learned to play the piano myself when I was younger. So it didn't take much to pick it up when I decided to make the move to actually do something about it.
I see. And in some of the work that you've done, you've also incorporated string movements and stuff like that. Do you play strings, or is it like cello or anything of that sort, or have you?
No, I'm just using a MIDI controller. I do have an old cello, but that's good for really sort of broken cello work. I like playing broken piano in Aoki Gahara. The first Flowers for Bodysnatchers album on Cryo Chamber, there's a lot of broken piano in there.
Yeah.
And that actually came from finding a broken piano on the streets and field recording it straight off the street.
Okay.
So I sort of took the same thing when I found an old an old cello in an old music store that was literally being given away. It had 3 strings on it and it was broken. I thought, okay, I can do something with this.
Sure. Yeah.
And, you can be amazed what you can do when you record even ruined instruments and broken instruments, and you can actually turn around them and make them into something.
Yeah. No, definitely.
But besides, the more complex string arrangements are done using virtual synthesizer technology and stuff like that. So yeah.
I see. Okay. So how did you fall into, or like start getting into dark ambient? Because and this is a recent revelation for me. I was oblivious to it until just a few weeks ago, actually. Like your project, and I'm gonna botch the name, but is it the Rosenshoul or the Rosenshoul?
The Rosenshoul, you said it right. Yep.
Okay, the Rosenshoul. Yeah. So you were doing that project came into existence before Flowers for Bodysnatchers, and I just figured that out like a few weeks ago, honestly.
That dates back to 2002 when I met up with Shiro Takahito, who, strangely enough, was Japanese, but I did not meet him in Japan. I actually met him here in Australia first. And we both had a similar interest in music, and we were huge fans of industrial music. And we had met we caught up later on in Tokyo at a During Grey concert, and we quite literally just bumped into each other again, and we had both walked out at the same time because the concert was absolute rubbish. It wasn't the fact that the band was playing poorly, it was the fact that the acoustics in the venue were absolutely shocking. And we just bumped into each other outside again. We just started talking about how much better it sounded through the wall than it did actually inside.
Sure.
And we said, well, there's a fantastic idea for a project. Why don't we try and do something that sounds like it's literally being played through a wall? And it sort of garnished the foundation for the Rosenshoul. Yeah.
Interesting.
It actually, there's a bit of trivia for you. With the introduction of Ableton producing live way back when they did, it gave artists the ability to quite literally play their digital audio workspace live. And what we actually recorded on the fly bands that we would go and watch. And manipulate the music right there and then and transpose it, stretch it out enormously, 40 times longer than what it would actually be.
Really?
And it laid the groundwork for that long format style song that the Rosenshoul has. I mean, there are songs that up there was 40 odd minutes long.
Oh.
And it's quite simply, we would take old stuff, literally like Nick Cave, record it live, and go back later and stretch it out and turn it inside out and pick it to pieces, remix it and stuff, and you wind up with these long format songs. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. See, I would have never. Yeah. That was. I would have never figured that in a million years. That's actually that's really awesome though. And I was thinking about, like, I mean, I guess this would be a bit of shifting gears, but thinking about kind of what you were doing with the Rosenshoul and then to Flowers for Bodysnatchers, it seems like in the Rosenshoul you were dabbling in kind of telling some sort of cryptic story, or there was like some cinematic element to it, at least in the last couple ones you have on your Bandcamp, like the Darkly I Listen and records like that.
Yeah, well, I guess over time, in conjunction with the way that Flowers for Bodysnatchers have moved, the Rosenshoul has, a narrative has come into the work, because that's what I do with Flowers for Bodysnatchers, whereas earlier Rosenshoul work was a bit more experimental, on-the-fly sort of stuff, but it has matured over time, yeah.
I see. Okay. So you started off with that. What was the starting the Rosenshoul so early, like so much earlier than Flowers for Bodysnatchers? How did you come into, like, with respect to the neoclassical elements that are prevalent in the Flowers for Bodysnatchers relative to the Rosenshoul? Like, did you not find neoclassical elements really fitting for that project, and that was Flowers for Bodysnatchers kind of created as a way to incorporate those textures, or like those passages?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, I tried the neoclassical elements over the Rosenshoul, and to a certain extent that it is in the Rosenshoul, but it can't be done as elaborately and as obviously as Flowers for Bodysnatchers.
Okay.
I tried trying to mix the two styles together, and for years it didn't really work. But when I did Aokigahara, I took that sound that the Rosenshoul had, and I really, really pushed it way back into the music, buried it way deep, and just layered everything else on top, like the field recordings and the neoclassical stuff. And it all came together, yeah. So there are familiar elements between the two projects, but I've really pushed it back, yeah.
I see. Were there certain artists that, kind of artists or inspiration you took from other folks that, like, compelled you to push into that kind of that neoclassical meets dark ambient space, or was it kind of like a natural thing you just wanted to, like, get out into the world? Like, it was just kind of like your way of expressing yourself, and it was just kind of a natural, like, was it something you just kind of fell into?
Yeah, it was something that I fell into. It did come naturally. I didn't look at other artists for inspiration, although you can look back at the Brian Eno's and all that, and Yuichi Sakamoto and bits and pieces, and go, well, it can come from there. But no, I did fall into it naturally. It wasn't like I was looking at any particular project or style of music or genre to get into. It just evolved on its own. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so how was the Aokigahara? That was, honestly, that was one of the first, besides the Sabled Sun Signal series, I think that was one of, like, the first dark ambient records that, like, really kind of, like, locked me into the genre. Like, it kind of really, like, showed me, how powerful and interesting, like, how, like, expansive of a genre it is. But how was it, that record kind of captures some of the time you were living in Japan, right?
Yeah, it did. I had to do something. I couldn't have spent all that time living in Japan and not do something with it. And Japan is such, you go there and you listen to the music it plays. There is some fantastic music. You can go to Fuji Rock Festival or whatever and listen to some great acts. But as far as dark ambient acts in Japan, there are some there, but nothing that really stands out.
I see.
And mean, I had to do something that reflected my time there, and it always fascinated me the journey that people took to Aokigahara. You know, this very deliberate and very purposeful journey that people would take to not commit suicide, but to contemplate committing suicide. Because they go there with provisions and food and everything to actually stay there. They don't go there with the intention of just offering themselves straight away.
Oh, really? That's very interesting. So like they'll go somewhere into the forest and they'll kind of like set up a camp or something, or they'll kind of like set up somewhere and just kind of.
Well, that's right. Yeah, they'll take a sleeping bag,
Wow.
a towel, and whatever, and actually spend time there. I mean, it is a great place. I mean, it's steeped in mythology, deeply steeped in mythology, and it's not a huge forest at the base of Mount Fuji, but it's incredibly dense and it blocks out all sound, even the sound of nature itself. You can't really hear there.
Really?
But it's a fairly big hike from, well, not really, from Tokyo to Aokigahara. But you've got to, catch a train to catch a bus to catch a train to get another bus or a car or whatever, get to the forest. So it's not, I mean, if you want to kill yourself, just go jump in a train, which a lot of people
Yeah.
which a lot of people do in Tokyo. So they're the ones that really mean it. But to actually go and think your life through that much before you do something about it, just the mindset fascinated me absolutely. Yeah.
And you did go to the forest, correct? Or
Yeah, I quite literally recorded it from. We used to live in Sumida in Tokyo, and I used to walk up and down the river all the time. And I sort of, well, this is a great place to start. All these fantastic sounds that came from where I lived, and I said, well, let's actually take these sounds and work our way from the walk to the train station, from the train station to the next train, and then on. And because everything that's on the album is in chronological order,
I see.
it plays out exactly as the journey to Aokigahara plays out to a certain point. I think it's a man metallic is when it stops and it becomes a bit more ethereal.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no. I think I vaguely recall that, but I didn't realize that it was like chronological, from beginning to. And did the story end like with you reaching the forest, or did you venture into the forest some and go? I'm not I know that there are like caves. There's some caves there and such, but I don't know much about it.
Yeah, I did go there to do the caves there. There's two caves there. There's Rain and Wind Cave, I think it is. Went there to do the tourist thing, and that's where the journey ended. But there's lots of recordings from within the forest itself, and it's a fair hike to the caves and bits and pieces. But there was no actual off-track walking like you see in some of these Hollywood movies or even the Japanese movies, because I mean these walkways are signed with if you go in here you're going to get lost.
Yeah.
I have no desire for it to be a one-way trip. Yeah.
Of course. And how was it? Because I listened to that when I listened to that record, I thought it was like pretty. I mean, it felt. I don't know the right way to describe it. Like it felt emotion. Like there were like a lot of emotive components. Like there, a lot of the piano passages, and then there were like there were some really nice like ethereal moments, but there were also some really dark, brooding, very kind of. I think it was like the Night Heroine song on that one, somewhere in the middle of that. Like I remember there were some like really dark pieces in there as well. But recording that, what was the like? How was it just recording that? Was it kind of a harrowing process, or was it just kind of a?
Not really. It was the one great thing about if you lived in any major city like that, or New York, wherever, is the fact that you can be in such a densely populated place and feel so incredibly alone. So it's not that difficult to shut your eyes and to imagine what someone would be thinking and feeling, because the background noise and the hum and everything can be almost deafening.
Yeah.
And you can quite literally think very clearly, regardless of how noisy and how busy it is. And doesn't matter how many hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, you go through a station like Shinjuku Station in Tokyo, over a million people pass through that station every day.
Really? Wow.
then you can just sit there and just watch throngs and throngs of people going back and forth and feel like you're the only person there, because it just becomes a wave of people.
Yeah.
It stops becoming people and just becomes a blur.
I see. And then you also, in addition to that, you also had, it came out about a year later or so, The Love Like Blood, and that kind of, that's also based in your time spent in Japan, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we're Aokigahara, we're watching the journey from a distance.
Yeah.
With Love, but I wanted to put us in the shoes of the person taking that journey, so it's a bit more, and I think you can tell by the song titling, it's a bit more spiteful in the way it comes across. Whereas Aokigahara is romanticized. Love Like Blood isn't. It's a lot more, I guess, on the nose.
Sure. And how was it, like, in comparing the two to one another, like, were there different challenges you came up against with respect to, like, trying to, craft a certain atmosphere? So, like, did your approach change, or the way you wrote songs in any way, or, like, just to kind of, like, get the atmosphere different for those?
Yeah, I tried to, with Love Like Blood, swing the dynamic around a bit more. I mean, there's even some breakbeat work on that, some really up-tempo, you could practically call it, someone's referred to it as Aphex Twin.
That's
the
right.
track, The Life I Ruin. It had, and then there's fully strung orchestral tracks. It had to swing about more in mood than Aokigahara. Aokigahara sort of floated through, I think, better than Love Like Blood. Love Like Blood had to be more spiteful. I think it's the third track, A Disease Called Love.
Yeah, that's right.
There's a piano stab in there, which a lot of people have said to me scares the shit out of them because they don't see it coming. which was the point behind the whole album. It's meant to catch you unaware. And that's the stuff like the Aphex Twin-ish, movements in it, and the fully strung tracks, weren't what people were expecting.
I see. Yeah, no, it's been a little bit since I've listened to Love Like Blood one, but I do recall there were a couple, some pretty chilling moments in that. So I guess in line, just since we're already in kind of that realm of those two records now, are there any more records or any more songs or compositions in your mind that you think you're going to produce that are still, like, tangentially related to your time in Japan, or are those Love Like Blood and Aokigahara, is that kind of it?
Well, the story is rounded off for me, not to say that I don't have diaries full of ideas that used or that could continue it, but to force it and produce another album, because Aokigahara was so popular, I don't want to go back and force it just because I get people asking me to do more. It was time to move on and deal with the work that I'm doing now. If it comes naturally, certainly. I'm going to probably take another trip back there to kick me into gear, but
sure.
I'd love to revisit it, but it won't be anytime soon. No.
Okay, no, that makes sense, because I was going to ask a bit about your new record, Asylum Beyond. How did that idea spring up?
Partly to do with the Fall the Night EP, based on the work of the poems of Nathan Hassel.
Okay.
Yeah, because I did that. Well, not really with him. I was reading his work, and sort of it helped cement a new sound. I didn't want to regurgitate the same sound that was in the previous two albums. I just needed to come up with a new sound. And I had produced these 3 tracks, and it didn't feel like it was going to be an album. So, and they balanced themselves quite nicely as a 3-track EP. It runs at just over 20 minutes, and I thought, okay, well, I like the sound. I like the piano movements. It was a lot more ghostly and haunted.
Yeah.
And that was the sound that I wanted to keep working on. So I put the Fall the Night EP out there and just sort of garnished people's response, and it went very well. Mm-hmm. So I continued to work on the idea, on a haunted house story, sort of thing, which is essentially what Asylum Beyond is. But it needed a nice graphic and gory narrative to it, and it just took time to get that together, to to lay the groundwork for those tracks. I mean, it's a fairly violent story if you want to get into, deep diving with that and thinking beyond what it actually, the blurb for the album is. You can really, it's really quite graphic.
Yeah, well, and that's something. So I'll admit, when I first read the synopsis, I'm like, oh man, did that actually happen? And I was like Googling, and I couldn't find like the actual guy. I'm like, oh, okay, I was being a little naive there. But so how did you come up with that story? Because it seems pretty elaborate, and you really make the album very immersive with some of like the little spoken word passages or some of the Latin phrases you throw in there. How did the whole story? If you want to even give a little brief synopsis on the story too, for folks that'll be listening to this.
Well, the album is based on a fictional character, Ernest. He's a Russian immigrant, moves to America, to Fairhaven, Massachusetts, and kills his two daughters and wife in what the police describe as ritualistic and bizarre occult murders.
Yeah.
And the subsequent investigation obviously, discovers that this led a lot deeper. And it obviously links to a fictional asylum known as Ravenfield, to expand mythology into a darker place. So it's not just about the occultism that he was into, but a very suspect and very sort of, Resident Evil, Silent Hill sort of asylum.
Yeah.
Even when you just look at the cover art to and the artwork and the album, you can't help but think of Silent Hill or Resident Evil, which I guess is a pitfall to being any sort of muso dealing with this sort of music. You can draw parallels between those sort of games and the music.
Sure. Yeah. So how did you begin the whole process of kind of pulling this story together? Yeah, like where did you begin with like creating these fictional characters and all that?
Well, like everything, when a story like this is, in all essence, based on actual events that happen. I'm sure somewhere in the world, some nutcase has killed his wife and two kids, and and if you take enough of those sort of murderous things and you put them all together, you can come up with a narrative that's quite believable. It's just a fictional, non-fictional story, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, and like all things, just the blurb itself and the way it reads out, it's a chronological thing again, and like all things, I start with field recording, and you work your way through the process of mapping out an audio journey that is relevant to the story, and that's where I start all my work.
I see. Is there so with respect to some of the occultism or just some of them, so is that something that just generally is fascinating to you too, just kind of like looking at kind of this darker side of humanity?
Well, it's I do have a passing interest in it, and I did get more interested in it as I was looking at doing the project. Like all projects, I would have several ideas on the go at once, and it comes down to which one hooks you the most, and which when you're researching really starts to resonate with you.
Sure.
And it's not just about reading about occultism and things like this, but getting into like the Latin phrasing and everything, and the dialogue that's in there are all actual invocations. It's not made up stuff. That is all actually, that sort of Bloody Mary kind of thing you say into the mirror however many times, and they're all real, legit summoning spells. Like the opening song, the Saint My Father, Devil My Sister thing, is actually to welcome a demon into your heart.
Interesting.
You say it 5 times, and it's meant to welcome a demon into your heart.
And then that's how it just starts. It just starts tumbling right from there. Okay.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So I guess that you're meant to believe that character is Ernest Seminoff, starting his journey. With that opening track, Red Ballerina. Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And so how was it recording that record relative to Aoki Kahara and Love Like Blood? Were there unique challenges proposed to you throughout this process, or was there anything experimental and different you tried on this one that, makes it stand apart, or just something that, like were there any just hurdles that you came up against in trying to tell this story?
Yeah. It was honestly the first take of the album was bloody awful. It was
Really?
horrible. I even put it, I put the album to Simon Heath in Cry Chamber, and it said no, it's bloody awful.
Really? And
Yeah,
this was like, did you do like a few songs, or was it like the whole, almost the whole thing?
it was the whole album, but
Wow.
when you immerse yourself in something so much, you do become blind to the faults that it can have. I mean, it was a very analog heavy album. It had the neoclassical element was very sparse,
Oh.
um, and it did need to come back. It did need to be dialed back a lot. There were tracks like Phantasma, which were almost entirely analog, and it did just drone on for 10 minutes. And looking back at the original track, it really wasn't that good. Technically, it was good, but as far as something that you would want to listen to, no, it wasn't that flash, no.
And it didn't really, did you feel like it didn't really like articulate the story as you wanted to tell it either?
No, well, that's exactly right. It
Okay.
didn't. I mean Phantasma wound up being an extremely field-heavy recording
I see.
uh, track. I mean, I literally went back down to the local hospitals and snuck around and wound up with, hours more
I see.
recording that I needed for that track. And that's almost entirely um, one big hospital piece.
Is that the one with like all the like the breaking of the glass and all those like really odd sounds, or like those kind of like creepy sounds going on in that one? Is that
Yeah,
the one?
trolleys being, wheeled back and forth up and down the hallways,
Okay.
doors closing, creaking and stuff. Yeah.
No, see, I would never have guessed though. So, and did that set back the release of the record a decent bit too, or did that create some? Were you able to like salvage some of the pieces from the other songs and kind of reform them with more neoclassical elements, or was it kind of like you just deleted it and just started fresh again?
No, everything did survive. The only track that survived entirely untouched was Mechanical Pictures.
Okay,
Rest all did get heavily reworked, and the opening track, Red Ballerina, didn't originally exist. That's an entirely new track.
I see.
And the last track, White Ballerina, that drone is in almost all of the tracks, but it was such a good piece of music from my point of view that I had to let it come to the front, let it stand alone, and I love that piece of music. The closing piece of music to that album is brilliant, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, when you bring that up, and I'm not terribly good with films, but I swear I got like some, when I listened to that track, I got some like Eraserhead vibes from it, or like I kind of got some like, I don't know, like it kind of gave me this weird, dense, indifferent, droning kind of sound. I don't know, I may be botching my description of that totally.
No, no. One of my favourite films is Eraserhead. I mean, and the score that David Lynch did for that is brilliant. I mean, it's music that I listen to when I'm driving, and it's probably the worst driving music ever. But
Why is it the worst? Is it just because it just too gloomy to?
it's too gloomy, and the fact that it contains a fair amount of the film's dialogue in it
Yeah, that's true.
doesn't really make for any particularly up tempo driving music.
No,
But
no.
but I do really enjoy watching that. I mean, it's watching that film for me is like taking a drug. It's almost sickening to watch, and it's the way that it grinds on that film. Um, and I've always admired the way that he produces music,
Yeah,
and I've always done that sort of distant industrial drone. If I look to anybody for inspiration, it would definitely be David Lynch.
interesting.
Yeah, and I've always had people asking me, can I do a longer cut of the track? And just put it on repeat and play it for an
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah. No, that is something though about like some dark ambient stuff. It's like you just kind of wish it could. There's some tracks that are so well written, you just kind of want it to go on for hours and hours, just without end.
That's exactly right. And it's the one piece of music. I mean, it is the same piece of music played twice over. But as I was working on it, it's the one piece of music that after you listen to several dozen times, it starts to put you to sleep.
Yeah,
It really is mesmerizing. Yeah.
definitely, definitely. So on this album too, I noticed, and this could fall in line with the story you're trying to tell. I noticed it was like decently longer too than your other records. Was it like, it almost seems like it gets up to like almost like a feature length film. Like, it's like 70 some minutes or whatever.
Yeah, 72 minutes.
Yeah.
I was looking at a longer album. And I've tried that before, but you just wind up with space filling songs and passages of music that are just there for no reason.
I see.
So when I composed this, I like the For the Night EP. I composed the songs essentially backwards. I would compose the second or third movement of the track first and work backwards.
Huh.
If you listen to songs like Ravenfield and A Darker Rebirth, the last half of the song was actually composed first, then the first half was composed last.
Interesting.
Just to, I know, it just created a more irregular movement to the album. It kept it a bit more spontaneous.
Interesting. No, I don't even think. I need to go listen to those again now. On that record as well, you did all the art too, right? You did all the photography.
Yeah. Simon asked if I wanted to do it all. He said he wanted to do a 16-page digital booklet for it. And it's the first time they've done that particular packaging on Cryochamber.
I see.
And he asked if I wanted to do it. I said, yeah. Sure. I mean, I've got the ideas in my head. I've got the images that I can use. I mean, like when I did because I do all the album art for most of my own work, and I had already designed the CD cover and everything like that. And I had lots of leftover material. Well, I could easily fill 16 pages or something, and yeah, it was a piece. Yeah.
Are there any plans to like make like short videos with it? Because I know you recently, or within the last 6 months, you did a little soundtrack for that, the thing in the apartment or whatever it's called. That short on YouTube.
The John Ross film. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to do video clips to tracks. There'd obviously be nothing like a horror short like that, but it's just a matter of I don't know. It's not the fact that it can't be done. It's just finding time for the logistics, I guess.
I see.
I'm already wind up being busy enough with other things without having to run around with video cameras and a sound crew and whatever.
Sure.
With everything, if you want to do it properly, you've got to spend the money and find the people, and it's not in my sphere of doability at the moment now.
I see. How did that, with the thing in the apartment, how did that end up coming about?
The director, John Ross, approached me maybe a year or so ago about wanting to work. And he showed me his work. He showed me the original thing in the apartment. The one that I did was the sequel. And I really enjoyed his work. And I didn't think much of it. And he got back to me several months later and he said, I've got a rough cut of the film. Do you want to have a look at it and see what we can do? And I said, yeah, sure, not a problem at all. So one thing led to another, and after about 2 or 3 weeks, we had a soundtrack for that little short film, which was a blast. He's a great guy. It was a blast to work with. The cast was fantastic. And I had a lot of fun, being able to, I think it's the first time that I've really put my music into something, a real horror movie, and I got a blast out of that. It was fantastic.
Is that something that you're hoping to do more of going forward? Is that kind of a creative space that you're hoping to push, deeper into?
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, Crypt TV, who funded it, it's actually produced by Ellie Roth, and you mean if it opens the door, I'm going to put my foot in the door, and I'm going to, push hard to do. Well, if they do a third one, I'd love to score that as well, or anything else out there. I'm all for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I may have this a little backwards, but you did a soundtrack as well back in the day for Everybody Dies in Utah. I don't know much about the film. I don't think I could find that one online.
It's a little indie film. I've done lots of bits and pieces for
Okay.
things that you'd never ever see. I mean,
Oh, I see. Okay.
lots of like here in Australia we have Trop Fest, the big film festival. I've scored music for half a dozen films that have been submitted for Trop Fest over the last few years.
Yeah.
Things that you'll never see because they never make it through submission or selection or whatever.
I see.
Horror movies and more traditional stuff as well. Even just composing standalone tracks with other musos or whatever. But yeah, it's just stuff that you never wind up seeing. But Everybody Dies in Utah was my first stint into filmmaking. And there's actually only 2 tracks on there. It's Moments of Cinematic Tenderness, part 1 and 2, that are actually in the film. The film's only about 11 minutes long.
Oh.
I just expanded the soundtrack beyond it for shits and giggles, really.
Okay. If there are any other details on like Asylum Beyond that I didn't touch on, or if there are any things I missed, I feel like I need to let that album sink in for a good few months until I really start to, fully wrap my head around it. But are there other interesting tidbits about the recording process or?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, it was for the fans. It seems to be a love it or hate it thing, because it's not, Aoki Kahara, which it seems to be a stick that I'm stuck with. But I think fans will get their head around it eventually. And it is. I mean, I think I hit the nail on the head. It is a haunted house story, and I think it does it very well.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just with the first 2 that are on Cry Chamber are a lot more emotive and a lot more personal, whereas this was a lot of fun. I mean, and I guess in part it did stem out of doing the horror film, the thing in the apartment, that I just wanted to do something spooky and fun.
Sure.
But yeah.
And have folks in general been receiving it pretty well, relatively speaking? Are there a good number of folks who are pretty jazzed about it, or pretty, just relative to Aokigahara and Love Like Blood?
Well, I mean, you can really only judge. I get a few people that will contact me directly, but
Yeah.
you can really only judge the feedback by what people have to say, on YouTube and what.
Sure.
You go to YouTube and you look at the comments and the plays on Aokigahara, and it's through the roof. I mean, that album is sold out now in Cryo Chamber.
That's right.
Whereas Love Like Blood, they were halfway there, but this was new. It's been Asylum Beyond has been well received.
Yeah.
But a lot of people said it is different and it's not Aokigahara, but there's enough there to keep them on the line, so to speak.
Oh, of course. This is kind of a general question I ask some folks. What do you usually want listeners to, just to feel, or what do you want them to take away from your music when they listen to it?
That it's this is going to sound really bad without bagging out the dark ambient genre. A lot of it can drone on. I mean, there's some beautiful dark ambient music out there, but I just needed it for Flowers for Bodysnatchers to be something that's just a bit different. I mean, it needs to carry more emotive weight. And there are other acts out there, I love Word Clock's new album.
Yeah, I haven't listened to that much, but I do love the Self-Destruction themes from last year. I think that's when it came out. That's an amazing album. I love that.
Yeah. But, and that for me did it, the new Word Clock album.
Okay.
It's the record label expanding its scope, and I love to see that. It's a very emotive album. That's what I like to see. I like to see, when they listen to my music or anyone else's, that they'll actually get something emotive out of it. I mean, will they feel sad, or will it resonate with them personally on some level? And when people come back to me and say, hey, this actually means something to me, that's what makes it worthwhile.
I see. From the time you began each respective project, from the days you started working on these to now, how have the projects changed for you? I know you can't really anticipate the future in any sense when you start something, but how like have they gone in ways you really did not expect or did not foresee, and like are you in a different place than you thought you would be?
I think the Rosenshoul has. It's never been a project that's ever been in any hurry to get somewhere. It only comes together when it does. I mean, there's years between albums on that one,
Yeah.
so that's a very natural, very slow evolving project. Whereas, Flowers for Bodysnatchers is something that I am more focused on, and I am deliberately and meaningfully putting my talent into that to get what I want out of it. I mean, I'm not letting it flow naturally. I'm trying to find more in it, if you get what I'm getting at there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really trying to get what I want. I'm pushing that project as hard as I can.
Yeah.
Instead of just letting it flow naturally.
Where are you seeing, over the next year or so with Flowers for Bodysnatchers, where are you seeing yourself push sonically with that project?
I it's like with any body of work that you do, there's sort of a natural flow on afterwards. I didn't like stop Asylum Beyond and then that's it. I mean, I continue to produce not necessarily songs, but just movements and passages of sound. It's just a lot more ethereal is what is happening at the moment. But then, you layer that etherealness in with the sounds that came from Asylum Beyond. That's sort of where I'm pushing the project to be even more emotive and more personable, I guess.
Are you, like, with respect, are you going to try and, like, develop more stories, kind of like these, like Asylum Beyond, how it's kind of its own, it kind of has its own story going for it relative to, say, Aoki Gahara, Love Like Blood, where, I mean, they are stories, but they're a bit more personal, I guess. If that's
that they are, and they are true stories. I mean, it's based on a factual event. That phenomenon of taking their lives and taking that journey.
Yeah.
But at the same token, with Asylum Beyond being completely fictional, it's almost like writing a horror movie. I mean,
yeah.
and it was a lot of fun. So I mean, I've obviously got ideas for other things, but whether I can turn that into another album or not, or a series of albums, we'll see. But the fact that Asylum Beyond stands on its own sort of lends itself to being able to do another project in the same vein, but a completely different and original story.
I see. I guess looking back on the year, like, what have you learned through the process of writing this album and just kind of like the whole year of 2017? Like, are there, like, just reflecting back on it, at like just compositionally speaking, like how you write stuff, like just what have you learned?
I think maybe not to take it too seriously.
Okay.
I mean, I invested so much in the original cut of Asylum Beyond, and to get it, to listen back to it now and think, oh my God, it wasn't that good. You really need to take the time. I mean, I need to take the time to sit back and to be more critical of my own work.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that, you could really, I mean, how many films are out there that you look back at, and we were just talking about Star Wars before, that people should really look back at it after they've made it and think, my God, what have I done?
Yeah.
I've butchered something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with all the time you've spent on your projects, Flowers for Bodysnatchers and the Rosenshoul, like what have they taught you about life and just just in general? Like, what have you learned, or what has it taught you?
Oh God, well, I think from looking at other people and trying to tell their story through my music, is that in the day and age that I live in, really the conditions that I live in and whatnot, God, I have it so good compared to some people, and to try and portray those people's follies and misfortunes. That's what that's what I try to do. To try and tell that sort of story. But just how better off, we all have, or the vast majority of us actually have it, compared to others.
Yeah. If you could recommend 2 or 3 artists you sincerely recommend folks check out, genre knows no bounds.
Yeah, I mean, if people want to listen to, well, the sort of music that I listen to, I mean, I'll listen to anything as long as it's good.
Yeah.
I'm not stuck listening to stuff on Cry Chamber or Cyclic Lore or whatever. I listen to a lot of heavy metal, a lot of death metal,
Nice.
a lot of 80s synthwave sort of stuff.
Nice.
I like the Midnight. I recently bumped into a little EP from a mob called Out of God, which I really enjoyed. Obviously, I listened to Ministry all my life. Birthday Massacre, God. Toby Driver, I love Toby Driver, KO Dot. God, the sort of music that I listen to, anything.
No, I actually wouldn't have guessed you were into death metal or anything of that sort. That's actually really cool to hear.
Even down to some of the heavier, more electro stuff, Skinny Puppy.
Oh yeah.
Skinny Puppy, Ogre, stuff like that. Yeah. God, I'd even listen to some of Georgie K's better music. There's all sorts of stuff in there.
Sure.
Creator, love Creator. All the 80s death metal stuff, thrash metal. Creator, Coroner. God, even through to Iron Maiden. I've got to listen to anything as long as I enjoy it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. Well, I really appreciate you spending time speaking to me. It means a lot.
It's good to actually catch up and to speak to people, instead of just, speak someone on the other end of the internet. It's you don't often actually get to speak to people, and it'd be good to get this. I can't understand Skype's video function either. I don't know what the hell it keeps on shutting down, but I have no idea what half the people out there look like.
Yeah. No, and that's kind of it's still very nascent for me, this whole thing, but I'm trying to kind of, I'm hoping to do more of these, because I've found these to be really fun, and just kind of, just talking to artists, and just like making contacts, seeing faces, as opposed to just sending messages, and then
And I think you get more honest responses as opposed to, to sending through a page full of questions that somebody can sit on for 2 or 3 weeks and type back exactly what they want. Here you're getting the mistakes and the balls ups and the whatnot. And it's a lot more personable. It's good. I like it.
Yeah. No, it's been a very interesting process. I'm still working out the kinks of trying to, hit some fluidity in the way I ask questions and articulate stuff. But
that'll happen in time. Yeah, I mean, if you stick to it, should chat.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it, man.
No, that's fine, man. And thank you very much for letting me have a chat. It was great.
Yeah, of course.